It's another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast, but are you subscribed? If not, make sure to like, share and subscribe. Spread the word about the Christian Reeve Podcast and enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is an author, a personal trainer, a fitness nutrition specialist and brain health trainer all the way from New Jersey in the United States. His name is Zack S. Rudledge. Welcome to the show, Zack. How you doing?
Thank you so much for having me. This is great. Thank you.
No, the pleasure's mine, man. I got really excited. I actually did way more research than I normally do for this because I always do a little bit of research beforehand. But with this, I actually went and read your book, if you can believe that.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
It's a very short read. I highly recommend it to everyone. But yeah, let's get straight into it. So it's called The Official Depression Relief Playbook. And when I read through this, there were, I think, did I write some extra notes? Oh yeah, I did. Oh crikey, there's going to be a lot. I really went into detail with this.
Great,
but no, I found it very interesting because, you know, there's a lot of books out there on and various theories on how to approach depression and stuff like that. And I was curious because you've condensed it down to a very kind of short read, highlighting some key areas that people should focus on, and I think it's good as a kind of a starting point for people, especially people that maybe have never kind of sought help, maybe are just kind of coming to grips with dealing with depression initially. So yeah, it's a good little read. Talk to us about like how this book actually came to be and what readers can sort of come to expect from it.
Sure. Well, it came to be because of COVID. So I think my friend put it best. He said COVID is kind of like shaking the leaves from a tree. So I was working in video production. And when that all kind of fell to the side because everything was shutting down, you know, my real, what do I really want to do came out. So I'm actually, I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I'm going to start grad school, for the second time now, but this time to become an actual licensed therapist. So in the meantime, so I start that in January. But in the meantime, because a lot of people had known my past and because COVID kind of heightened a lot of things, let's say, that it was its own challenge, you know, in a lot of different ways. A lot of people were reaching out to me saying like, hey, I'm struggling, you know, what do you think I should do? And what I did was I was going through and I was emailing people and I was going through looking at a lot of the old emails I was sending people back when I was in grad school the first time, in film school actually, because they had known my past. And I said, this is getting crazy. You know, I must have sent, you know, messages to 20 different people. I said, I'm just going to compile this into a book because it's going to be way easier. And I can just say, go get the book. So that's how it came about. It was almost by accident. It wasn't like a planned thing. It was just really out of convenience. And then once people started getting back to me, saying that it was actually making a big difference in their lives, I was like, oh, you know, maybe I should start pushing this a little bit, you know, get some eyes in front of this. Yeah.
Have you had any sort of feedback about the book so far? Like what's the reception to it?
So the feedback's been surprising. The most surprising feedback was from people who said that it was great for anyone, because I had like friends reading it who aren't depressed, and they're like, this is actually really good just for people in general. And I was like, oh, that's really nice.
That's what I thought reading it as well. I was sitting there like, there's some really good advice in here. You can tell that you're very well read and that you've read there's you know, when you come to sort of read certain books that everyone's read and like you inevitably sort of insert those into like your own kind of theories and approaches and stuff. I was reading it and I was like, yeah, I've read something similar to this before. This is good stuff. This is good advice. It's good to appear in a little short book like this.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm glad you said that. I made it short on purpose because the last thing I wanted to do when I was 20 years old was read through 350 pages to get one or two ideas out of it, right? I just didn't have the energy. I didn't have the energy to get through a TV show. It was that deep of a depression. So I made it short on purpose because I didn't want it to be daunting. And I made it like pound for pound, punch for punch, the most powerful thing I could in the most compact presentation I could really make. But yeah, another like really pleasant surprise was I've been going on a couple podcasts with like actual psychotherapists, and they've been saying how much they love the book. So that was really cool. Almost like a validation. Yeah. So, because they were like, yeah, I would recommend a lot of these things too. So that was really nice also. Yeah.
You picked up on some good points there. I think the word you used there, yeah, daunting. I think that's a very good kind of word to describe not only having to just read a big book like that potentially, but also when you're dealing with depression or something similar. If you're receiving good advice, that's what I would consider good advice. You'll often be told, try to approach things one step at a time. So if you've got like big goals that seem really daunting, obviously try to, complete little goals and help you get to that bigger goal, right? So something like this is perfect because, yeah, if you're depressed, you're not going to, as you said, you're not going to want to read some big book that takes like 500 pages. I mean, like it's a struggle to even get out of bed in the morning. Do you know what I mean? Right. That right. In of itself is like a major challenge. And for those who don't suffer, that might sound a bit crazy, but trust me, I hope you never have to suffer from depression because it's one of those really horrible things that people have to deal with. I don't really suffer with it as much. I've had like acute bouts. I suffer more from like anxiety. That's my thing.
Sure.
But I totally don't know where you're coming from with regards to this. And yeah, I think there should be more kind of resources out there like this where it's a lot, because as you said, like and it's frustrating as well. There's so many books out there, not just in psychology, but just in general, that could be condensed into just those simple ideas. And I feel like a lot of the time you're just listening to the author's ego or waffle. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Some of the stuff, it depends who's written it. I mean, sometimes you get like really good stories. For instance, that was one of the things I liked about yours was that it was like there was like stories taken from your life and kind of, it was kind of told from the perspective of, it had like a human kind of feeling. Do you know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, I'm reading some book and they're giving me some ideas and that's great. It's like, here's like my personal experience and something to connect with me, because I think that's more important, especially when you're dealing with depression or something similar to that. Like you want to be able to talk to someone who can relate to you, really. I mean,
exactly. And then like that's a big part of like the beginning part of the book. And like I think the subtitle is something like, it has something to do with, advice from a guy who's lived it or something like that. And like that was really important for me because I lived it. So like I've read plenty of those books that are more academic and they're like, it's not really very human. So just relating on that level, I felt like is an important way to kind of get people into gear, right? And realizing, and I say it in the book, there are different flavors is the way I put it, different flavors of depression. Some people may have like a PTSD type thing. Some people may be in grief. Some people may be, which grief I would argue isn't depression, but we can get into that later if you'd like. Some people are dysthymic, which means, they have a low level depression that hangs with them. And then when they come across traumatic events, they fall into these deep pits that are harder to get out of. So there's different types, right? And I've been through a lot of them. So yeah, I tried to make it as human as I could.
There are so many great quotes in this book. I just want to read a couple of them. Here's one: write drunk, edit sober. Couldn't agree more with that one. You are not a depressed person, but rather a person living with depression. I want to circle back to that as well. You referred to something called the D-Day approach. That's actually, can I just ask you now, what exactly, talk us through the D-Day approach. What exactly is that?
So essentially, I believe that there's no silver bullet for anyone when it comes to getting out of that hole, because that was one thing I was trying to do, was trying to find the one thing that's going to work when I was finally in gear, trying to, sort myself out. So we don't concentrate on one thing. We concentrate on everything that you can do. So there are theories out there that depression, is primarily a gut issue. So they're giving, because you actually create more serotonin in your gut than you do in your brain. So they're giving probiotics. There are theories that it's inflammation. So that's why I put things in there about diet, getting your inflammation down. And there are different theories about causes. I believe that there can be myriad different causes. And on the same way, there's, probably 50 different ways that you can battle it. So if you're coming at it from first the structure, right? Like your actual physical body, and then so you're trying to sort out, if there is inflammation or comes out some kind of serotonin issue, coming at it from the mind issue, because I argue that your mind and your brain are, well, it's true, your mind and your brain are different things, right? Your brain's the organ. Your mind, your mind can use your brain. The problem is, a lot of the time, our brains are wired still for that prehistoric landscape where we were looking out for the saber-toothed tiger. So it was more advantageous to look out for the danger and see the negatives as opposed to the pile of food, because you have to jump out of the way of the saber-toothed tiger, right? So, and the food can wait. So you're more in tune to that. So yeah, I just tried to come at it from everything, which is really the way I got out of it, to be honest, and if you do a few of these things, you'll, notch up a few points. But if you do all of them, you're really going to start to feel a difference.
Again, I just want to keep moving through some of these quotes. I mean, I'm not going to read them all because there's just so many, but I had to just write these down because they're just really good. Depression lives in the past while anxiety lives in the future. We must stay in the present moment. One can only control right now. I completely agree with this one, so much. Apologies there, I'm having problems with my camera, but I'll keep going.
Sorry, I can hear you.
So basically, as long as we can see you, that's the main thing. So basically, my favorite thing about this one is that it's just like, I completely agree with this concept of, living in the moment. I think that is what we must all do with everything. You know what I mean? Like, you can't live in the past. The past is done, it's buried. And you can't live in the future because, it's constantly changing and forming, and it hasn't happened yet. So you got to live in the moment.
Yeah, which is obviously easier said than done, right? Living in the moment's pretty tough, but that's where I think one of my turning points, and I've had a lot of them, is like embracing challenge. Like when I went to grad school for the first time, or even undergrad, it was really tough for me, especially with everything I was dealing with. So just really sinking in that moment. Like if I had to write a paper, let's say, I would sink into it and just sink into opening the document and then just putting my name out and just taking those little micro goals. And that's what kind of focuses you in the moment. It's kind of like being in the flow, like when people say you're in the zone. I don't know if they use that in the UK, but in sports they say you're in the zone, right? Like if you're cycling,
fight sports particularly, isn't it? Like UFC, that kind of thing.
Yeah, even like doing podcasts, right? The only thing we're thinking about, I mean, you're thinking about your camera, but the only thing I'm thinking about right now is like our conversation, right? I'm just completely in this moment. So easier said than done.
I think it depends. I know what you mean. I'm capable of kind of multitasking. Like if I was to quantify my brain power right now, it's 85% what you're saying and 15% the camera. It's slowly becoming more 50-50 through the course of what's going on, because this is frustrating. It happens to me. It's happened last 2 weeks. Just on a side note, I don't know what it is with Zoom lately, but not having a lot of luck with Zoom lately.
Yeah, but you know what?
Podcasting.
This is a good example too, right? Stuff's gonna pop up. There's gonna be problems. Nothing's gonna go as planned. So what are you gonna do about it, right?
This camera issue is a metaphor for the obstacles that you face in life and the barriers.
It really is. It really is. So like you're not over there like screaming and throwing things and freaking out. We're just rolling with it and continuing our conversation. Whereas if I were in my deep depression, I would have been like, oh, of course it figures, the camera would be going out on me, that kind of thing.
That's a really good point. No, I'm glad you actually raised that. I couldn't agree more. There's been times when I've lost it over stuff that just doesn't matter. And it's taken me many years to get to this point now where we're at, where I can just kind of calmly approach these things bit by bit. Like, for instance, I've spoken about, I don't think I've spoken about it on the podcast before, but when it comes to kind of like dealing with anxiety, one of the issues I've always had is getting this kind of like paralyzing feeling where I kind of feel like I can't really do much. Like it takes over both physically and like physically, it's like, I don't know, it's like extreme, I don't know, like sickness, I guess. But it just takes over. And it takes a while to get back in the normal frame of mind. And now I understand all of those sayings, like, sleep on it, or don't make a decision when you're angry. Like, all of these things are so true. Like, you just can't do it, because it will just completely ruin any chance you have of being able to approach things, I suppose, kind of in a, I don't know, normal
with a clear mind, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm glad you brought that up too, because depression and anxiety tend to travel in the same pathways in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, so a lot of time people will, graduate from one and go to the other, like that kind of thing. So they can both be there.
What do you mean? Sorry.
So I actually started, with anxiety. That was how it started.
Right.
I sunk into a deep depression. And then as I was getting better, the depression went away, and I was more of like an anxious guy. So, so you kind of,
I got to say, I think you can live with anxiety and sort of still function fairly normally. Depends how much it paralyzes you. Like, for me, sometimes I get it a little bit and it's like, okay, I can sort of ignore this, I can manage it. But sometimes it's as bad as depression. Sometimes it's like, oh fuck, I can't leave the house today. I don't know. This is really, like, when I get those days, I think, like, if I was working right now, I don't know what the fuck I would do. I wouldn't be able to be in the office or be, I don't know, dealing with customers or something, feeling like this, because it would, as you said, you wouldn't be able to approach the job with a clear mind. It would affect your judgment on things and I suppose your emotional response and everything. Because it
absolutely,
I don't know, as much as you try to fight it, a lot of the time I feel like you don't win that battle. And depression is 15 times worse. That's why, like, it took me many years to understand fully what depression really is. And I think we're all still trying to understand it fully. But in a nutshell, it's not being sad or being depressed. Not sad or being upset. It's like it's almost like a nullifying effect, isn't it? It's like a numbing experience. It kind of just makes you like, and it depends. Everyone has a different experience, but what many people have told me over the years, and I've had the same thing, is it kind of like looms and sits over you and weighs down on you, and it kind of makes you demotivated, I think would be the best way of putting it. It's like you just don't want to do anything.
Yeah, it's hard to put into words, right? Yeah, right. Which is why things like music exists, that kind of can describe the indescribable, whatever. So yeah, but as far as like anxiety, a little bit of anxiety, that's going to exist, right? And that's normal. And a little bit of sadness is going to exist, right? Not the same as deep depression. When it comes to like things like panic attacks, one thing that tends to help a lot of people that I know is like the I don't know if you know the Tibetan approach, where like, for instance, my fiance has panic attacks, and I tell her, accept it, run towards it, like run towards that panic attack. Instead of trying to fight it, she's feeling that push against. And if she runs towards it, a lot of the time people feel just like it melts away, because there's no longer that struggle anymore. It's one method that tends to work for people when it comes to like those acute panic attacks, right? But yeah, a little bit of anxiety is going to exist, but there's a certain point where you do need to start getting help, right? So it's finding that when it starts impeding on your life, like you said, if you're having problems going to work, okay, now you got to start taking action, right?
Yeah, again, it depends. Like, I've always had what I would term as acute. Like, I've never received medical help because it's never really stopped me from doing things. I've always been able to sort of exert some degree of control over it, and I think that's the kind of the key point that we're sort of covering at the moment is, to what degree are you able to control it? If you can control it and it doesn't affect your life too much, then maybe you don't need help. But I think for the wider majority of people, that simply isn't the case. And then there's that battle of, do I, don't I, and you get anxious about that. You get worried about that. It's like, should I, will it work for, and everyone's different. Like, some people, for instance, need the drugs. Some people fare better with the therapy and no drugs. Some people need both. You know, I think it's an individualistic thing. You can't, and therefore you can't generalize. And in the same way, you can't generalize experiences either. Like, you know, one person describes depression in one way, the next person describes it in a different way. You know, like I remember I had a partner many years ago, and she was dealing with various different. I think she had some bout of schizophrenia, so she was taking medication for that, and I think she was also suffering from depression, if I remember correctly. But anyway, she had medicine for it, and she described it as being like that, giving that nullifying effect, numbing, like she couldn't feel anything, and she was sad about that. Like she wanted to feel, and so you know, we kind of worked with each other together to help her get off them. And that was a very trying time. I remember for a good like 6 to 8 months, it was not easy. And I wouldn't recommend that, by the way. I think you should always, with these things, at the very least, seek help from a therapist or talk to a professional about it. Because, I mean, the bigger point here is like the effect on the brain's chemistry, brain chemistry, sorry, because everyone has a different reaction to these things. In her case, she was okay, but it took many, many months for things to kind of normalize and dull down. And I think in the end it worked. It worked out, worked well, but it was, for a long time, we were seeing like why those drugs were at least initially necessary. But I think it said a lot for having people around you that support you. Do you know what I mean? Because the whole time we were just kids, we were just teenagers. You know, I had no idea how to deal with something like that. I just said like, hey, I'll be around. And originally she didn't want me to stick around. It was this kind of thing like, you know, I'll understand if you want to walk away kind of thing. And I just couldn't do that. Like, I felt like it was shitty to do that, pardon my language, but like, you know what I mean? You got to kind of like, if you say you love someone, you care about someone, that's the reality. It's not how you see it in the movies. It's being there for people, their low moments, and showing empathy, showing that you'll be there for them even when they're not so easy to deal with and stuff. And
right,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. And I've had many friends over the years that have, you know, had various different conditions and been suffering with things. And I think the biggest thing I've understood now is that way more people suffer from these things than you think. And I think it's made me kind of think that maybe we're all on some sort of degree of a spectrum. So even people that say, hey, I'm always fine, I never have issues, I wonder sometimes if maybe they have experienced something, but they just didn't identify it as that. They just kind of thought, oh, that's weird. I probably had a bad day or a bad week. Then it's like, maybe there was something more serious there. But you just, I don't know. I think everyone has to kind of judge it for themselves and you know, base their decisions on whether they get help based on that. Well, how much control do you really have?
At the very least, if you're human, you've been through some kind of trauma, right? Whether it's capital T or lowercase t, you've been through some kind of trauma. If you're a person, but so yeah, I don't know what the healthcare is like over in the UK, but over here in the US, it's a shit show. It's just really awful, and especially mental health. I mean, I have health insurance. I'm lucky enough to have health insurance, which a lot of Americans don't, and it doesn't cover mental health. So, you know, if I were to have a mental crisis, what am I supposed to do? You know, because a lot of my friends, you know, they want to go to a therapist, but they can't afford $150, $200 an hour to go sit and talk to someone, and they may really need it. It's really bad, you know, and that needs to get sorted out. And I'm getting a little off topic there, but
that's an important point. I mean, our healthcare systems are totally different. Like in the UK, we have the NHS, but when it comes to like basic things like A&E and basic surgeries and stuff like that, you can usually get it pretty quickly straight away. But with everything else, you're essentially on waiting lists. So it is free, but sometimes you'd be waiting for a long time. maybe half a year or maybe even more than that. And the more and more that time goes on, the more and more they're trying to kind of, there's always this talk about they're trying to privatize healthcare in the UK. And I don't think they'll ever really successfully pull it off, because the NHS is a, I don't want to call it exactly an export, but it is kind of one of the last few remaining things that exist about the UK that makes it kind of a draw, a reason to come here and live here. And you know what I mean? And it's paid into by the taxpayers. It's supported by the taxpayers. So it makes sense. It kind of works, but it is flawed. It's deeply flawed. And there are aspects to it that are being slowly privatized and stuff. And, you know, it is what it is. But it kind of confuses me, like what you've got there in America. Like, I mean, I've heard stories, but is it true that, like, okay, let's say I'm in a terrible accident and I have to go to hospital, be stitched up, maybe even have surgery or whatever, to stay alive. If I don't have the money, then, because I've heard two things. I've heard either one, you get operated without your consent and then you just get given the bill afterwards. So they just do everything, save your life, then you deal with the shit. Or is it sort of the alternative, which is, oh, check this person whether or not they've got health insurance. If they don't, that will decide whether or not we keep them alive.
No, they always do the surgery. They do save you. Yeah.
Okay. So
the problem is like the hole you're in afterwards.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know quite a few people who are paying off these hefty medical bills, 10 years later, because little bits at a time. Yeah, they do.
So they do. Okay, so at least they do sort of an installments thing. They don't like expect you to just pay it straight away.
No, that is an option. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, but I know people who have had cancer and their insurance won't cover things, which is insane. Like, what are you paying for the insurance for?
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me, because while the model might be flawed there, at the same time, if you're paying for health insurance, you would expect it to cover pretty much everything. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, I understand if there's specialist stuff there that maybe you have to pay a bit more for, but what's the point of paying for it? I mean, like, just insurance of any kind. You know what I mean? Like, I've had, like, for instance, one of my flatmates had an issue with his bike recently, motorbike, and the insurance wouldn't cover the issue. And I was like, well, so what? Why is he paying for that insurance then? Like, what the fuck does it cover? Like, like
yeah, we got the same thing here. Yeah,
it's weird. Or like when they try and get out of things and they're like, oh, it's an act of God, we can't possibly cover you on that. And it's like, how much money do you scoundrels make every year? Come on, can afford to pay out. Give me a bit of money. I mean, if you're paying me a couple of thousand now, you probably made 100,000 for me in my lifetime. So let's be real.
Right. No, you're right.
Because if you think about it, if you never claim, they're just getting free money.
You're absolutely right.
You know what I mean? And I know I'm literally just explaining what insurance is there, but it is a great concept, because a lot of the time most people don't claim on it ever, and you are just paying perpetually, and they're just lining their pockets from you. It's kind of like the whole point of insurance, isn't it? It's kind of like a what if scenario. It's like, oh, I'll keep paying you just in case, just in case something happens. Let's hope nothing happens, touch wood. But just in case, yeah. But you know what it's like, because they're so tight and because they are businesses, it kind of makes sense why they try to, refuse to pay out, because it's like they lose money when they do that. And it's like, yeah, but how can you justify not paying when you earn that much money from that many people every single day?
Exactly. And that's kind of what it comes down to, right? I feel like, and I don't know what the answer is. It's way too complex for my mind, but, I feel like your mind is part of your body, and it should be somehow covered, for the majority of people.
Yeah, no, 100%. Body cannot live without the mind. Come on.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Outside of what appears in your book, what other useful tips could you give to people suffering with depression?
Outside of my book?
Yeah, so is there anything maybe that you didn't have space for in the book, or anything maybe you thought about later?
Yeah, I did. And it sounds maybe a little simple or silly, but I wish I had said this. It's really important, and I would have put this in the whole, like I have a mindset chapter. It's really important to practice forgiveness, and of course, practice forgiveness with yourself, and that's what everyone always says, right? And that's a given, I say. But you've got to really forgive other people, because everyone else in your life at that moment, odds are they don't understand.
Yep.
Even if somebody's been through a deep depression, they don't completely understand your specific scenario. Nobody would have understood my specific scenario. So you have to forgive, the like misguided
Ignorance.
Advice, or just their ignorance, or if people says something off the cuff that lands the wrong way, they just don't get it. So you have to forgive that. Maybe I'll add that to the book. Yeah.
There are people in my life, like I've reached out very few times, but when it's really gotten bad, I have reached out. And there are certain people that just say straight away, you should get medication. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I don't like medication. I don't like the concept. I don't want to touch it, because I know what I need. Like and that might make me sound a bit, silly, like, or how can you know you're not professional? It's like, well, look, I've noticed over the years that when I talk to someone and they understand and they're empathetic and they just shut up and listen and don't try and like tell me what to do, and they just listen and are there for me, I suddenly feel 100 times better. So what I need is understanding people. And unfortunately, they're very hard to come by, because most people, well, firstly, most people, and I've said this on the podcast before, so sorry for repeating, most people confuse sympathy with empathy, and they're very different. Sympathy, I feel, is being like, yeah, I feel so bad for you. Yeah, that's so bad. Oh, it's tragic. That's tragic. Here's what I would do, blah, 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 right? A lot of the time people just offer their advice unsolicited. But what I understand, and don't get me wrong, I'm not sitting here trying to paint a perfect picture of myself. I, for years, did not understand the concept of empathy. I was even told that I lacked empathy by certain people. And I hold my hands up. Fair enough. I didn't get it. And in more recent years, now I get it. Empathy, and this is kind of simplifying it, but this is what I understand. Empathy is when you see someone upset, you go sit down next to them and you say, hey, you want to talk? And they might say yes, and maybe they'll talk, and you sit and listen, and you're just there for them, give them a hug, get them food, whatever's comforting. But more often than not, they'll say no. And they might sort of want you to leave or something. And best thing I think you can do in that scenario is just be there. Don't say anything. Just be there. Operate as normal. Don't make a big issue out of what they're dealing with. Don't make them feel like they're an issue or like they're doing something wrong. Just be there. And the person will naturally open up, because they want to talk about it, but they want to feel comfortable. They don't want to feel like they're a burden, like they're an issue. Like if they talk about it, there's going to be a problem. They'll open up when they're ready to open up. It's your job to just be present and be there and listen. Too many people open their mouths and just start talking and blah, 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 blah. No, shut up. Listen. That's empathy, in my opinion.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know.
That's great. Yeah.
But I think that, and again, I think it takes a long time to learn that. It's, some people, there were people that said to me over the years when I would say, they would say, oh, you lack empathy. And I was like, oh, I just don't understand. They're like, oh, this is a natural thing. How can you not naturally have empathy? And it's like, well, when I was growing up, I wasn't really shown it a lot, to be honest. I mean, I had supportive parents and stuff, but like, sometimes they would lack sympathy and empathy, sometimes they would be a bit difficult, they were just different people. They had their own stuff going on, That's the thing we always forget growing up, is our parents are people too. Our families are people too.
Absolutely.
But I always looked at that as like okay, maybe I just need to. The problem was I was caught in this idea that I needed to be like, more stronger. I had to stop being weak. I had to, act like a man and do all this stuff. And it's like, that was all wrong to think that way. But that was back then. And, the world was different. Things were different. Times were different. These days, it's okay to come out and kind of talk about these things, and people will be more understanding, and there's more resources and stuff out there. But at the same time, and here's something that people don't always talk about enough, and I think I might have mentioned this in the podcast before, but apologies again if I repeat it. Sometimes things, they come up again. We've had a few guests on here that have spoken about mental health and stuff, so
Sure.
While society tells you it's okay to open up and talk about these things, in actuality, when you're in companies, working in companies, it's very rare that when you tell them you're dealing with something that they actually will be supportive and take that into account. A lot of the time, they'll just use that against you. Because you will be classed in a kind of liability category. Now you're like potentially problematic. And then there's also the element of like, if they treat you badly, you could potentially sue them. So they've got that in the back of their mind.
Sure.
But the bigger issue is, they're a liability, and because here's the thing, so many companies, and I'm talking about big companies, not startups. No, I'm sure there's plenty of companies out there that are decent and have good ethics and stuff. I'm just talking about those big companies you see, the big major providers who, they paint this picture of being great employers and workplaces. And, we're there for everyone. If you're having hard times, we'll even pay for your therapy, like, but then when you actually try to get that help and you tell them, hey, I'm suffering, hey, maybe I need a week off, maybe I'm not doing so well.
Yeah.
Suddenly you become a problem.
Yeah.
And I've seen this in many companies where they won't fire you straight away because you could sue them, but they'll find a way to get rid of you.
Yeah.
They'll find a way. They'll construct a series of events, or I like to say, a series of check marks against you. And then they'll be like, sorry, we'll have to let you go. It's just all of these different things. It's just not working out. Best of luck, blah, 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 blah. Right. But it's BS and it's hypocrisy. And it exists in so many other things, not just in depression and mental health, but like ageism, sexism, racism, all of those things still exist in workplaces. I like to call it like an institutional problem, like institutional racism is a very big one.
Right.
But I think, there's a big discrimination against mental health still, even though we are kind of going and moving in the right direction. I think it's still there because, people forget companies are there to make profit. Businesses are there to make profit, right? So people having bouts of depression and mental health issues and stuff, that means they're losing money because you're not working. And that's the only way they see it, and I've worked for companies, and again, I'm not saying all companies are like this. There are good companies out there. I need to keep reiterating that because people always take my words out of context and they're like, oh, he's saying all companies are bad. Like, I work for a company and they're not like that. But it's like, my experience is it's not always how you think it is. Like it was only in the recent couple of years that I learned that like HR is not there to support like the employees, but rather to support the interests of the business. And the clue is in the name: resources.
Right.
That's how you're seen. You are a resource. And I don't know. I guess my whole point with this is a very long-winded point, so I do apologize to our listeners and viewers, but I just think there needs to be less of a stigma against mental health because everyone has a different thing. Like sometimes it's very long term and people need a long time to address their issues. But sometimes it can be just a small bout. Sometimes if you just give someone a bit of time, a couple of weeks, that'd be great for like 6 months after that. You know, sometimes, not always, but I'm saying like sometimes if you grant
different.
that. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So back to what you said, that's interesting because I never thought of that. I've never had like a corporate job. I've always worked for very small companies. And I never thought of it that way. But, you know, in the same way, I guess just in anyone seeking help, it takes bravery, right? It's a shame it would take that extra bit of bravery to seek help because you're worried about your job. I know it's there, but I would hate for that to be a limiter. I know it's a limiter. I would hate for that to be the limiter, like the thing keeping you from getting help. If you're in that situation, I think you don't just owe it to yourself in a way. I mean, you know, of course you get this, but you would hope that the company would support you because you want to sort these people out and get them help and you would have a better employee. But if you are afraid, let's just say, you know, you don't have a supportive system at work, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family to find another way to get the help. It's something that it can't wait. You can't just wait for a perfect work situation because there may not ever be a perfect work situation, right? You may get a different job and it may not be there too. So yeah, it takes bravery, but you, this is your life. You got to have the bravery to find help somehow, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think my advice would just be avoid telling your employer, I think, because I just feel like they're not going to support your best interests. And it's like I said before, you're treated as an asset. So,
right.
And I've seen it. I've worked for companies, you know, you'd be there like 7 years, 10 years, and they'll just fire you like that. Don't need you anymore.
It's a shame. That's a shame. It's really terrible because we're all human, right? We've all been through those traumas. Like I said.
Yeah, no, I mean, and again, it's about asking for sympathy. It's about asking for the empathy and the respect of the company that you're putting all this hard time and effort and work into. And you want a little bit. It's like when you ask for something, you don't get it. And I know I'm painting a very negative picture here, but I guess I'm just saying to people like be wary of that. You know what I mean? Be cognizant of that. Like, it's a job. That's all it is. And there's many jobs out there. And if you're going through a difficult time, just try to kind of focus on yourself in that moment. You know, everything else is secondary.
Yeah, seek out the help, and you know, just seek out the help. I mean, that's the most important thing, right?
During your studies of psychology at university, did it accurately convey mental health conditions when you were learning about them?
That's a hard one because it's so varied. It's so varied. Like we were saying earlier, you know, like, well, that's actually one of the reasons I come at it, like I say in the book, at this D-Day approach, right? Coming at it from every angle. Because I know somebody who had some very serious mental health issues because, it's awful. Dropped on his head as he was a baby.
Okay.
Just terrible, right? But his situation isn't going to be the same as anyone else's, right?
Right.
So saying accurate, no one picture can be accurate. You know, no one picture can be accurate. Yeah, that's my best answer. It sounds like a lazy answer, right? Because
no, I get it.
Because like when I get people asking me about what's the best workout for me, what's the best diet for me, and I hate saying it depends. Because it, you know, but it does. It depends on your goal. It depends. Are you an ectomorph or an endomorph? It really is an individual thing. Yeah.
I guess I was just curious because, you know, at the scientific level and educational level, I do often wonder if, you know, because they have like their own agenda and they're trying to like get you through. I mean, university is a business. They're trying to push you towards that academic route. Sometimes I wonder if they actually teach things as they are accurately, or if, you know, corners a car, or if, you know, maybe it's only one particular route of think. I don't know how to put it.
Right. Yeah. Like they would
know.
only be saying, it would only be talking about medications, and they wouldn't be talking about relationships, or
Right. Yeah.
they would have their one thing that they're pushing. Yeah. Actually, this is actually pretty interesting. The program I'm starting in the spring is a mind body program. So it's called dance/movement therapy. Right. So it's a traditional, I don't know what they're called in the UK, but LPC, or licensed professional counselor, which is a psychotherapist. But it's with this track, this extra certification called dance/movement therapy. So I'm not doing the dance stuff, right? But the movement therapy, the idea is that we keep score in our body. That when we've gone through these traumatic events, we're carrying it in our gut, we're carrying it in our back. You're carrying your stress there, and which is great. We're getting our bodies involved too, which I think can only help in that talk therapy. But also, I think it would be a great recruiting tool, especially for men, because when I was 20 years old, not that I would get into the dance stuff, but getting into the workout stuff, okay, that could get me to open up. That's a way to recruit me. I'd be like, okay, I'm not one of those quote unquote broken people who goes to therapy, but maybe I can go to this movement thing. It's this alternative route that, okay, we're moving and then now I can kind of open up, and I feel like it's a more integrative thing. So yeah, that's the program. Yeah. And that's, so I'm really stoked on that aspect of it. Yeah.
So just going back to the workplace stuff, because you mentioned that you haven't worked for big companies, only really small companies. But with those companies, did you ever experience sort of discrimination in the workplace as a result of your depression? Like, did it ever become apparent to them, or did you just keep it under wraps? Or
no, because the place, I was lucky enough to where the places I worked, everybody's quirks were pretty out in the open.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. So I worked in creative environments. So like, it was very clear when people had OCD, and people were open about it, and it was very clear when people had trying to think of some other ones people had. OCD was the big one, especially because people, I worked in video production, and people would do lighting, and unless the lighting was like absolutely perfect, where it's like, dude, it's not gonna matter. It's not gonna matter. Like, there is no such thing as perfect when it comes to lighting, right? But it had to be absolutely perfect in their mind, and our shoots would get delayed by an hour or something.
Sometimes I wonder though, with stuff like that, if it's less about wanting perfection and more about like a sort of a metaphor for a lack of control in their life. So it's like, this is the only thing I have control over in my life, so God damn it, I'm going to make sure I get the most out of this.
That's absolutely part of it. Yeah. But it was interesting. Yeah. So like anything that was out there, like we had people with alcoholism, and it was in the open. Yeah. So it was like, yeah. And so we were all pretty supportive of each other.
How do you navigate that though? If you're working in a sort of a young office where presumably everyone kind of goes out for drinks every now and again, like how do you kind of...
Steve wasn't young.
Oh, right. Okay. Fair enough.
Well, he was a person, and it was, bouts of not drinking, bouts of drinking, bouts of being great, bouts of bad behavior, bouts of being a sweetheart, bouts of being argumentative. And we just had to kind of roll with it, which was actually a pretty nice environment, because we would roll with the guy who had the OCD. We would roll with, it was just kind of like we accepted it and worked with it the best we could and supported each other.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, props to your company, because I think a lot of, kind of like what I said earlier, a lot of companies, I feel these days, would not accept that and would not tolerate that. So it's refreshing to hear of a company that sort of does and then works together to resolve it, because I think that's a better way of approaching it anyway.
Because we were a team, and you got to fill in each other's weaknesses, in a relatively small team, so there were going to be weaknesses. And it just wasn't that corporate mindset. It was, we're doing like TV production and stuff like that. So yeah.
Fair enough. What are some misconceptions about the realities of depression, in your opinion or experience?
One thing that really gets me, man. Like, I had this conversation with a girl recently who she was openly one of those people who was like, who essentially thought you could yell at the person and to snap out of it. you know.
I gotta say, just to interject there for 1 second, like, what person thinks that that's gonna work, as not just to deal with depression or something, but just in general? Like, what do you expect when you're talking to another human being and you start shouting at them, or just being generally like just nasty? Like, what do you expect is gonna happen? Like, either that person's gonna like burst into tears and be like really broken down and like really upset because of that, or they're going to react really violently and angrily towards you. Like, there's no kind of, they're not going to be like, oh, that worked, I feel great, thanks for that, you really shouted me back into normality. Like, what the fuck?
It's kind of like tough love on steroids, I guess, is the way she saw it.
That whole concept is toxic as anyway.
Yeah,
like,
well, I agree with you.
Like, don't get me wrong, I think sometimes, tough love, if you're talking about being brutally honest with people, I totally agree with that. And
pep talks have a place.
Mm-hmm.
Pep talks have a place, which you read the book, I'm trying to kind of,
but you can do that with respect. You can do that in a way where you're treating that other person with respect. What you just laid out there with the whole shouting thing, that means that person has zero respect for you.
It was kind of sad. I will say she had been through her own traumas, I'm sure. So, and that's part of our job, right? Is like, okay, like I said before, forgiveness for them, they don't understand. At the same time, you do have to give yourself those pep talks. I can say, okay, this isn't my fault, but that doesn't mean I'm stuck there. You still have to be driven to get out of it. You still hold some responsibility, even though something happens to you. Let's say, like we were using the accident metaphor before, a car accident. A car hits me. My car skids out in the middle of the highway. It wasn't my fault. Still partly my responsibility to get that car out of the way so traffic can resume, right? It's not like I'm just going to sit there.
Yeah.
So,
but some people would, though. That's the thing. Some people would. Some people would be like, oh, that's not my problem.
Right. Well,
why should I have to deal with that?
Right. Yeah. So that's part of my message. This is partially, your responsibility, right? Even though it's not your fault. I don't know. I mean, we could talk about metaphors all the time, a bunch. That's the way I tend to communicate, is through metaphors. Yeah. But yeah, part of this is your responsibility, and part of that's kind of like energizing. It's not like I'm helpless. If I see this as partially a responsibility, even though it's not my fault, let's say, part of that is like, it's almost like to me, it feels like this breath of fresh air. It's like, okay, let's I have some control here in this situation, and everyone absolutely does. You have control, not of everything. Nobody has control of everything, right? But, what's that saying? You don't have control of what happens to you, but you have the control of how you react to it, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, you can react to it any way of your choosing. So yeah, it's really important that we take some responsibility here.
I think that's probably the most important aspect of it, really.
Yeah.
It was only really when I started doing that in my life that I noticed things got a lot better. And it's refreshing as well. Like, take lying as a concept. If you just stop lying and just say, hey, yeah, shit, that was me, I fucked up. Like, you'd be surprised how well people react to that. Like, initially, they might be a bit like angry at you, but they'll respect you because you tell the truth. A lot of people don't. And I think a lot of people kind of just let it go, like, oh, lying, everyone does that. And it's like, nah, not everyone. And if you don't lie and you tell the truth, I think it shows that you're showing respect to that person. You respect them, and you're not treating them like an idiot. You're treating them with the respect they deserve. So yeah, I think that's a big
I got a quick little practical communication tip. So let's just say you mess up doing something, right? And you somehow offend me in some way or whatever. One like thing that helps really well is, instead of you just, let's just say you send me an email apologizing, saying, I'm sorry, right? Okay, fine. But this is the way I would do it. If you sent me an email, you said, I'm sorry, or you said, I thank you so much for understanding. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for, that way you're thanking me. I would much rather hear a thank you. You're putting this on me, as opposed to just, I'm sorry. So, and just saying, I'm sorry.
Oh,
you're saying,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for, you can say you're sorry, but then say, thank you so much for understanding. This has been so tough. Thank you for, not blowing up on me. Then it's like, oh, then I would feel pretty good about it. So, it's just a little communication tip there that we learned.
No, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I think that really does work well. Yeah, I've said that to people from my past, previous partners, friends. I've always sort of thanked them for the lessons they taught me and what it kind of brought to my life. So I think there's something to be said for that.
Because you're turning it's not just about you, you're turning it into the relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Moving it forward, do you have any plans to kind of extend the work for the official depression relief playbook? Maybe do future editions or a second edition, or maybe just a sequel or something like that? You got any plans for that?
As of right now, I don't. What I most likely, I have a pretty packed life at the moment. I'm shooting a full-length film in a couple months. I'm getting married in October.
Wow.
And I start grad school in January. So it's a pretty packed time. Yeah. So along with that, I'm finishing up a certification to become a yoga teacher. So there's a lot going on right now. So right now I'm just getting this out, and I feel like this is a really good starting point. Like you said, I feel like I'm really proud of this right now. After I finish up my schooling, I've got to imagine I would beef this thing up and make it a little longer. And I don't want to go too long. Like you said before, I want to keep it pretty short. I've got to imagine I'll add more, but immediate plans, no. I'm still, I stand by this book. Every word of it, I stand by it. So right now, just trying to get it out and in front of as many people as possible.
Talk to us about your decision to not proofread or edit the book before publishing. I think a lot of people.
Oh, that's just me, man. So like.
Fair play, man.
Yeah, that's just me. I was like, I could agonize over every word, like I could, and like make it grammatically perfect. But is it gonna matter? Like I could agonize over it, and like, that's not the point of this book, right? If there's little flaws in there, so be it. Like my point was to get these messages across as clear as I could, and I feel like I did that. If there's a missing apostrophe here and there, okay, well, whatever. Like, I'm not like, whatever, dude. I'm a person. Like, it's not like this is my thesis or something. Yeah.
Even when I've read like major works, published books, I've still found spelling mistakes and stuff. I feel like that just happens.
Oh, I mean, okay, so cool. Yeah. Like I literally haven't read it.
No, yours specifically. I'm talking in general. Like,
oh, okay, yeah.
Big work, like official published books. I've found spelling mistakes in. You know what I mean?
There's one I caught that I was really glad I did. It was on the cover. I misspelled the title, so I'm glad I caught that one.
That's an important one.
Yeah. But yeah, it's all good.
What have been the biggest challenges associated with your depression, and how did you overcome them?
That's a good question. The biggest challenge, I mean, I'm thinking about the hardest points, which were, I don't know if we talked about this when everything like really hit the fan. It was right after my best friend was killed. I don't think we talked about that.
Wow.
So that was the summer after high school. And so I noticed, bouts throughout my childhood, but it was, I didn't notice it at the time. Thinking back, I notice it now. And so he was killed the summer after high school. All my friends went away to college. I ended up failing out of college because I just couldn't take it. So that was like my deepest point. I think the hardest point was just getting going, like getting into that mindset of figuring out that I can be more than this. I can be more than just the guy at the rock bottom. That was the hardest part, just getting going. And that's really, I guess that's why I wrote this book, right? Like, and that's why I started it the way I did, was just, this is the thing. I joke that this is like, this book, I wrote it for the worst possible audience, or like the worst possible way to get sales, because these aren't people who buy books, right? Who like, if you're that depressed, you're probably not seeking out help. You're probably not going to buy a book on depression. So I really wrote it in one way as more of like a gift for people. So like I want people like, let's just say you have a friend who's deeply depressed. I would love for you to buy this book for them. Give them the hard copy to lay next to their bedstand every night, right? So that's kind of like, you know, one avenue I was going for with this book. But yeah, to get back to your original question, I know I'm going off on a tangent.
You mentioned there about your friend. First thing I'm going to say straight away is, are you comfortable talking about that?
Oh yeah.
Because I think a lot of people listening could probably really benefit from hearing this story. And you know, I've lost friends as well over the years, so I do understand to some extent. You mentioned it's high school. So how old are you roughly at this time?
Right now, like as we talk?
No, when you were at high school, when this happened, when your friend passed.
18.
Right. Okay. And like, how did it happen?
Car accident.
Right. Okay. Was it like, how can I put this? Was it because of someone else, or was
Nope.
it maybe he was at fault in that scenario?
He was at fault, just driving too fast, and it was a spot where other people had crashed.
Oh,
and,
okay.
Because he was going over the speed limit, right? And the road curved, and right at the curve there was a telephone pole, and he was going too fast, hit the telephone pole, died. And it was a spot where other people had crashed. For some reason, they didn't move the telephone pole. If he was on either side, he would have gone safely into a field. It was just one of those things. It was just a mistake. It was just an accident. And like, yeah, and you know, and it doesn't really like end there, because there are all kinds of things that bother you after the point. Like,
right.
Like the reporting on it was they found alcohol on the scene, but he didn't drink. What they didn't say was they found the bottle that they found was unopened, but that wasn't reported on. So like,
oh, I see. Right. So what it was, okay, if I can theorize a little bit here. So while you're trying to contend with this, just the situation as it is, because that's enough for a young man to be dealing with, anyone to be dealing with, right? That knowledge, that situation. You're then hearing those police reports, and they're basically painting a picture of a person, your friend, and that's not your friend. That's them trying to make a story that is untrue.
Yeah, it wasn't the police. The police.
So the media.
That's the police are how we learned the truth. It was the media who just said alcohol was found, and they left it there. So then, like, I was actually the president of SAD. I don't know if they have that in the UK. It's Students Against Drunk Driving. I was the president of SAD in high school, and like people were reaching out to me, being like, talking about how there was alcohol found at the scene, like really insensitive things.
Did the media actually kind of? You said there, like, they kind of said there was alcohol at the scene, but did they kind of imply anything? Did they kind of come out and say, "Oh, maybe it's a alcohol-fueled thing," or did they kind of say, as you say, they just left it there and then let people make their own things? Because
they left it there. It there
all right.
because there were no blood tests or anything, but there didn't have to be. It was unopened, and he didn't drink, so it was like. So it was an interesting thing, right?
So obviously you mentioned that this is like kind of the starting point as far as your
the deepest point, the starting of the deepest point. Yeah.
Talk us through, like, let's paint a timeline. So that happens, you're 18, and then when were you able to overcome the depression? Like what was the end point?
There is no end point. So
okay.
It was a brick by brick thing.
Mm-hmm.
Those next few years were brutal. It wasn't a 3-month thing. It was brutal.
No, of course not. But obviously, I kind of think that, like, when I say the end point, what I mean by that is like the point where you can kind of return to
living. so yeah, it wasn't
in a sense,
It wasn't till when I started seeing like colors again is really kind of how it felt. I was 24, So it took a good while, and I was looking for those silver bullets, things that could help, and they weren't there. So that's why, like I say, that D-Day approach in the book, right? You got to kind of come at it with everything. And it wasn't until I was, I was transferring from college to college, trying to sort it out. And yeah, it wasn't until I was about 24, 25 when I started to see colors again, seeing that there's like a life ahead. Yeah.
So what were the things during that time that really helped? Like, did you have a good support network around you? Were there particular, I don't know, hobbies, interests, things driving you, maybe work, maybe studies? What were the things that kind of helped you to get out of this, to overcome this? What were the main things that helped you?
So I was playing in bands this whole time, right? And it was a very toxic scene. I mean, I still play in bands, but it was the scenes, the places I was playing in, like New York and Philadelphia. I literally was seeing people getting thrown through tables and people pulling out knives and like really rough areas, right?
When was this? What sort of time would this have been?
This was early 2000s.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah, playing some really seedy places. But we eventually worked our way up, and we were playing CBGBs, and I don't know if you know what that is.
Rings a bell.
But yeah, so that's kind of like punk rock mecca. So like the birthplace of punk rock in New York was CBGBs. That's where like the Ramones, Blondie, Talking Heads, Television, they all came up from there, from CBGBs. So that was like a huge deal for me. We played there just before they closed. And but at the same time, if high school me knew that I was playing CBGBs, I would have been doing backflips for a week. But at that time, I was also struggling. So it was kind of like, you can look at it two ways: that the depression ruined the CBGB's experience, or the CBGB's experience was helping me pull me out, right? Because it was like this thing that I could latch onto. So that was happening, right? So, but playing music never stopped. I still do that, like I said. But one thing that helped was, working just on that physical structure, like getting into working out. Like I had done martial arts through my teen years, and I stopped when high school stopped. As soon as he died, I stopped.
Yeah.
But then I started pulling on those lessons that I learned. I learned like a lot, not just the working out, but the working in, right? The meditation and like the stuff too. And that was like these small bricks, and it kind of, from there, I just added, then it was dialing in the nutrition, and just, it was brick by brick. It was kind of the clouds kind of slowly going away over a decade. Yeah.
So really, I think the biggest lesson we can learn here from your experience was that, like, it's a step-by-step thing, and it's an ongoing thing, but also there were things you were working towards, different interests you had, goals you had, that you were able to focus on to then sort of help you to get through those times.
Yeah. And like, it took me a very long time. So the point of the book is, I want to cut this down for people. This is all these lessons I learned and all over years and years and years, so that was one of the big reasons I threw this together too. It's like, I would love for somebody who's going through something like this to be able to cut that time, by X amount, because, I wouldn't wish that many years on anyone. Yeah. Just essentially, you lose them, it feels like.
So in that, you mentioned obviously martial arts. Yeah, you're a karate black belt. So what are the key things you've learned from karate?
So there was a lot, and that was from the years I was about 11 or 12 till I was 18 was when I was really deep into it. And for sake of ease, I think the most important part that I pulled away from it was the meditation. It was that Zen meditation.
Is this yoga, or is this something else?
No, that was from the karate. It was the
okay.
Zen meditation. Yeah. That was it. That was like the it was a Japanese style, so it was like that Far Eastern mindset. Yeah, that was the thing that I held on to the most. That was the biggest help for sure. Yeah.
Okay. And similar question. what are the key things you've learned from yoga? What have you sort of learned, taken from that?
Yeah, so yoga is like my new martial art, is the way I talk about it, right? So
Interesting.
yeah, like, because I love the discipline of it, and I love the fact that like karate was nice and it was good at that time because like you had like the goals to work up to, like the ranks, and it was a cool thing. And yoga, there's no ranks, right? Like I'll be a yoga teacher, but there's no like, I don't know, you can't be a black belt in yoga, right? So like yoga is great because it comes at it from like the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, like you have all of it in this one package. And one thing that people like, if we're just going to talk strictly about like the physical side just for a second, man, okay, this was a life changer. So the first time I took yoga class was in grad school. There's a free yoga class going on in like this side room at our gym at the university. So I'm sitting there and I'm, talking to this girl before we start, and she was very young. She was just out of high school. And she said, you see all these guys out there moving all these weights around? She's like, they think they know what fitness is. They have no idea. So I was like, oh, okay, whatever. So I do this yoga class. I could not walk the next day. And I'd come from, I could walk, but it wasn't pleasant.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I'd come from a fitness background. At that point, I was already a personal trainer. I was lifting weights and doing all kinds of cardio stuff. But man, it it fills in all these gaps that you didn't know were there. It's really great. Like, so I encourage everybody, I'm an evangelist when it comes to yoga. Go take some classes. It's so much fun.
I've seen a lot of people talking about hot yoga. So basically doing yoga, but like in like pretty hot temperatures. Do you think that's any better? Like, how does that differ to sort of regular yoga? Is it better, worse? Like, talk to us.
I can't speak to that because I've never done it.
Okay.
It doesn't appeal to me. I have a tough enough time doing, the regular 90-minute classes. Like, maybe there are some benefits. I don't know, but I'm cool with what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Moving it forward. What exactly does a brain health trainer do?
Oh yeah, super fun, right? So like I got that a couple months after COVID hit, because I was just looking for something like to do that I could possibly do, like freelancing or or just to make myself expand my horizons a little bit. So essentially, you're looking at the different parts of your brain and you're looking at what activity can strengthen these parts of your brain and how they work together. It gets very boring very quick, but I'll give you no,
I'm not bored. I find it interesting personally.
Okay, so yeah, but the listeners, they're gonna send me hate mail if I go on this.
No. You talk all you want. My listeners are very intelligent, esteemed people. They like this stuff. You talk away, my friend.
Okay, so I'll say this. Everybody, you got to start playing pickleball. Okay, and if you don't know what pickleball is, it's a cross between like ping pong, table tennis, and like regular tennis. So you're standing and you're knocking the ball on the ground, but it's not as big as tennis. It's like a tennis, like quarter size of the court. And the ball is like almost like a wiffle ball, like this plastic ball. So good for your brain. Table tennis, ping pong, whatever you call it, also really, really good for your brain. Okay, incredible. A lot of these things that we learned are just theories. And I don't know if you guys know Daniel Amen over there. He's a pretty famous brain guy, I guess. He's an author, and he has like a lot of PBS specials over here on like public television. Okay. And it was his disciples who started this whole brain training thing. Okay. So some of it is theoretical, based on like, we think this will happen for your brain, right? A lot of it's like ways to fight off Alzheimer's, to improve balance, to fight off Parkinson's, right? I'm gonna add a chapter in the book. Because there are things that are important, like coffee and juggling, believe it or not, really, really good for your brain. Balance exercises, it's a super fun thing. I'm actually doing a presentation on it, I guess in about a month at my yoga school. So yeah, it's a cool thing.
Awesome.
Functional Aging Institute. I should plug them because you should check that out. Yeah, it's a certified brain health trainer, and it's with the Functional Aging Institute. They're a really great institute. I mean, they have all kinds of free materials. So, anybody who struggles with cognitive things, they have a lot of great materials there. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing. Talk to us about your work as a fitness nutritionist specialist. Oh, no, I got that wrong. Fitness nutrition specialist. There you go.
Yeah. So in a way, that's actually how I ended up on the road to becoming a full-on just therapist. Because what I was doing was, meeting with clients through Zoom about nutrition issues. Okay, so they knew I was a personal trainer and I knew my stuff about nutrition, but then I got this certification and people who just really struggled with their diet. And we were not talking about their diet. That's not what was happening. They knew what they should be eating. They knew what not to eat. And they would just, it was just all these emotional issues would just pour out of them.
But how does that happen? First you're talking like, I eat too much chocolate, man. But anyway, so my husband's cheating on me. Where how do you get to that? It's
not that far of a jump. You believe it or not, it's not that far of a jump. People would say I overeat, or I'm eating all this garbage. I know I should be eating this garbage, but I was so stressed out today because of this. And that's it. And that's all it took. And it was, I would say 80% of the clients were talking about emotional issues.
I guess you must be pretty easy to talk to then, because it all comes down to comfortability. I mean, one of the things I've always said about this podcast, for instance, I know it's a little bit different, but you always get more out of people when they feel comfortable. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then it becomes a case of just asking the right questions. But it speaks a lot to your, I suppose, demeanor and ability to be supportive, that people are able to open up to that. Because I mean, the fact still remains, you're a fitness nutritionist specialist. You're not, in that particular instance, you're not being a therapist, yet they're happy to talk. So it's interesting.
Right. So that's why I was like, I am more than happy to be your friend as we talk about this kind of stuff, and I can be empathetic, but I should probably get some schooling in this, make sure I don't break anything. So
I see. So you basically went and sort of studied more about therapy after that to sort of help with that and just also for your own.
Okay. Yeah. And I had already built up a great rapport with a lot of people because I was a personal trainer, and that's usually where it started, was we were going through the workouts and stuff, and then they would want help with the nutrition stuff. So I already had that rapport. But yeah, so now it's kind of like leveling up, getting that master's in therapy. So, yeah.
What are the best and worst things about New Jersey?
Oh, that's a great question. The best thing, we have a lot of best things. So, okay. So like one thing about the US is people are very proud of being from Texas and New Jersey. We have, I don't know why. Texas is gigantic.
Texas is cool, I don't know what it is about, like, obviously back in the day, Texas, Lone Star State, all that, right? But these days, because I've had a lot of guests on from Texas, from places like Dallas, Austin, places like that. It seems to be like a massive, like, cultural hub, and kind of like a cross between Silicon Valley and like San Francisco 2.0. It's kind of like cultural and new business, small business venture type capital. It's fascinating how it's developing into that. But apparently that's the deal with Texas these days.
Yeah, I'm not knocking it, but New Jersey's better. So
whoa.
So I'm very lucky because we lived, we're an hour and a half from New York. We're an hour from Philadelphia. We're 40 minutes from the beach. Probably the beach is our best thing. We're a small state, but we have the most usable beach, more usable beach than any other state, even Florida. because you have like a lot of these states, like California has way more coastline, but they have like rock cliffs. New Jersey has the sand beaches. So we have the most usable beach. I'm actually moving to the beach next week. So yeah. And we're also, so we have the beach right there. And then we're also just an hour or two from snowboarding, skiing, because we have these mountains in Pennsylvania. So we're like, we kind of have everything right here. So that's the best part of New Jersey. Oh, you're getting excited for the worst?
Oh yeah, let's just get into the dirt. Come on, bring it.
So the worst part of New Jersey is what people, the perception of this very narrow strip of that's like Turnpike near New York City. It's like, that's what people know, because like The Sopranos.
Newark.
And yeah. So there's some great people there. But it's this narrow strip that you drive through that's very ugly. That's like a lot of factories, like refineries, things like that. And then there's like this little spot. And of course they picked out the worst spot for the Jersey Shore, that TV show. It's the only spot like that. They're not even from New Jersey. They're from New York. Yeah. But it is like that. That little, quarter-mile strip is exactly like it is on the TV show, right? But the rest of it's really nice. I've heard that our drivers aren't great. But I lived in Washington, DC for a while, and those drivers were jerks too. So like, I don't know. I'm not a fan of aggressive driving. Like, I like when everyone's calm on the road. So
I gotta say, because I'm currently like deep into season 4 of The Sopranos, which, by the way, just on a side note, everyone should go and watch that. Go out of your way to watch that. Amazing cinematography, amazing acting, all that jazz. But it really does show off New Jersey, and I think not in just a bad way, in a good way. They show you nice parts and bad parts, which I think is more like how it should be. You know what I mean? Like you should always show the best and worst places in an area, because believe it or not, every city around the world has that. London, you think London is all beautiful? Hell nah. I could show you about 50 different places and you'd be like, that's in London? Yes. Every place has it. I mean, and you got to do that. And the good thing about The Sopranos, obviously, it's about gangsters. So, a lot of the places they're going to be hanging out are going to be dingy. But then they show you in the higher class places, like they show you that, oh, hey, there's like, they've got quite a bit of culture here, and there's like high end places and nice houses and nice neighborhoods and stuff like that. So it's like, and I feel like, because I've lived around the world, I've lived in different places and stuff, and it's the same thing every time. There's what the media perception is, and it either paints a place as overall really good or overall really bad, and then there's the reality.
Yeah.
And it's always usually a mixture of both. I don't feel that there's very many areas around the world, to be honest, that are purely like good or purely bad. I think there's generally a bit of a mixture.
Of course. Yeah.
What's the biggest life lesson that you've learned so far?
Oh, good Lord. That's a tough one.
It's my favorite question.
That everyone is capable of far, far, far more than they believe. That's true. Everyone is way more capable. And it took me a very long time to learn that. And I don't mean like, I guess like the world now, I guess we would equate it to like Instagram likes. Like, I don't mean like that, right? Like, well, man, I guess in a way you could put it that way if you want, but I mean like meaningful things. Sorry to all the Twitter heads out there, whatever they're called, the Instagram heads, but yeah, you're capable of so much more. Yeah, it really is true. Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and it sounds cliche, but the biggest thing holding people back is their own mindset. No matter what situation they're in, it's their own mindset. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more with you. As we draw things to a close for today, do you have any final words or maybe some upcoming projects that you'd like to share with our listeners/viewers?
Well, I feel like that forgiveness thing is pretty important. That's been like my thing lately is forgiving other people who don't understand. I'm working on all these creative projects that were kind of put on hold because of COVID, and they're all kind of exploding now, right? Now that we're coming back to life. Oh man, I think of something fun. I can't think of anything fun right now. I can't think of anything fun.
See, I think that right there So many people, I'm like you too. People ask me like, what do you do? What do you do? You know, like I do live streams a lot, and they'll be like, what do you do? What do you do for fun? I'm like, I mean, this is fun. I like this. You know, is it? And it's relative, isn't it? Because like what your idea, I was like, oh, what do I do? What do I spend my time? I don't know. But it's like we all have these different passions and things, and you know, to me, it sounds like you're a very varied guy. You got a lot going on in your life, and yeah, it's just exciting to hear what you'll do next. I mean, I think there's definitely legs for a sequel to this book. This is a really good book. Again,
thank you so much.
The official depression relief playbook. Go out of your way to get that.
Tell you what, I'll do this. If anybody wants like a preview of it, shoot me an email and I'll send them a chapter and see if it's their cup of tea. Because I understand, you know, if it's not, that's fine. Or it may be the thing you really need to read or really need to pass on to someone else. So shoot me an email if you want to preview it, or just get it. It's like $3 or something on Amazon. I don't know.
It's worth every penny.
Thank you.
Just want to say a massive thank you for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. It's an honor, man. This is really cool.
And to everyone listening or watching the Christian Reeve podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to the Christian Reeve podcast, leave us a like, leave us a review. Let me know your thoughts, what you think. Let me know who you would like to see on the show next, what you would like to hear on the show next. Be safe, be well, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.